First Things, episode number 52.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and my goal is to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. Thank you for joining me today as we are embarking on a brand new series that we started last week, going through a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Last week we went into chapter 1, and I thought this week it might be really good to actually hear from the author himself, especially if any of you are buying the book and you're still waiting for it to get in so that you can read it along with us as we go through this series on really embracing the essential things in our lives. I ran across a talk that Greg McKeown gave, I believe at LinkedIn, and it's a great overview of what this book is about, as well as some really interesting question and answer session at the very end of this. It is about an hour in length, so it's going to make our show today a little bit longer than an hour, but I want to play this for you so that you can get the essence of what essentialism is all about. You can get the aerial view before we land and start exploring the land in detail. So we're going to cut off into this, and then afterwards I'll be back just for a few minutes at the very end of the program. And then next week we will pick back up in chapter 2 of the book, which is really part 1 of the book, which is about essence, the core mindset of essentialism. And chapter 2 deals with choosing, the invincible power of choice. So let's go now to Greg McKeown and hear the overview of what essentialism is all about, and then I'll be back to close up the program.
15 years ago, and I'm going to need a cheer for this. 15 years ago, I quit law school to pursue... That was good. See, if you give the cue right up front, then people know what to do. I quit law school, and instead, what I really wanted to do was to teach and write. And so I spent the last 15 years doing that, but particularly trying to answer a single question. So I had 15 years to answer this question. You're going to have 15 seconds. But it's LinkedIn, so we expect, overachievers to be able to perform on demand. Okay, so here's the question. What is it that gets in the way of otherwise really capable, driven people? What is it that keeps capable and driven people from breaking through to the next level? That's the question. All right, so don't be shy. I'm going to repeat your answers so everyone streaming will hear those answers. What are your thoughts on this? Don't be shy. So it says focus. Who said that? 5 points for Gryffindor. Well done. Okay, go. What did you say?
Same thing. Inability or lack of focus.
Inability or lack of focus. Okay, think beyond what you think that this session is about. What keeps capable people from breaking through to the next level? Think about it really. What? Go. Lack of confidence. If you had more confidence, you could take on something that was different and more challenging. Go. Yeah, so not focusing on the right things. So you're focused on the wrong things, like a Kodak moment. Focused, but on the wrong things. Go. Time. What do you mean by time? Lacking enough time to be able to pursue the things that would help you break through. Good, thank you. Here. Communication is what you said. What do you mean by it? What do you want? So you aren't even saying what you want. You're not communicating the things that you want. Thank you for this. Go. Not identifying what you want to do. Actually, that's a kind of Jeff moment because when I was talking to Jeff on one of the interviews for this book, we had this sort of meeting of the minds where he started a sentence and I finished it, and the sentence was, when I ask people what it is they want to achieve 5 years from now in their career, and I finished it because we both had this sort of parallel life doing this, is I said, no one can answer it. And it's true still, that the bottleneck is often not opportunity, but clarity. So thank you for that comment. More. What is it? Go. What is it that holds capable people back from breaking through to the next level? Yes. Trying to meet other people's expectations, to be consumed with what we think everyone else wants us to do instead of what's inside. That's an interesting answer. We'll come back to that. And maybe one or two more. Yes, please. fear of change, comfort zone problems. We're comfortable where we are. We don't want to get through to, to something that's less comfortable. It's like confidence we mentioned before. Maybe one more.
How about fear of failure?
Yeah, it's a similar idea, but it's not just change. It's that you just rather keep the success we have than risk it. Thank you for that. Here's the answer I found. And to me, this was counterintuitive and hidden in plain sight at the same time. So why is it that capable people don't break through to the next level? And interestingly, it's not just capable people, it's capable teams, capable organizations, and I think even beyond that, capable and successful countries even. Why don't they break through to the next level? The answer is, to my great surprise, success. Now, why? Well, I first noticed this working with executive teams in Silicon Valley. And what I noticed was that when they were focused on just a few essential things, the right things, it led to success because they could align all the resources, move, develop the agility, and so on. But with success came unintended consequences, opportunities, options, an intensity, and those things unintentionally undermined the very causes of success in the first place because it diffused the focus, diffused the attention. And so, exaggerating the point in order to make it, success can become a catalyst for failure. So, just think about it this way. Now, we've talked about it, the problem is, it leads to what Jim Collins has called the undisciplined pursuit of more. The undisciplined pursuit of more. So, here's where this gets even more complicated, is that we are in a time, societally I mean, where we are in a culture that celebrates the undisciplined pursuit of more. We've seen Silicon Valley bubbles before, we've seen real estate bubbles. We're very familiar with that idea, the irrational exuberance that can come about. But right now, my point of view is that we have a more bubble, where we have celebrated irrationally this idea that if you can fit it in, you should fit it in. You've got to do more of everything, more on your calendar, more activities, more friends on Facebook. It's okay to kick Facebook here, isn't it, I think? In fact, I think we've been sold a bill of goods. There's this whole idea that the superman and the superwoman can do it all, and that this will lead to success. In fact, it won't just lead to success, it is success. And this is why when people, you've had these conversations, how are you doing? So busy. I am drowning right now. But why do they do it with such a celebratory air? Why do they backdoor brag about it? Because something in our culture has said this is a badge of honor. It's almost the same as being successful. Be busy or be successful. They're the same thing. And taken to its, in fact, I was just thinking about this just last night, that one day we're going to win an award. Congratulations. You are now the busiest person on the planet. Well done. You haven't slept for the last 2 weeks. You've been going nonstop. It's not really a banner of success, but somehow it's become as if it is. Well, contrast this to an executive in Silicon Valley I interviewed for the book. So this is, you can put yourself in his shoes. He's worked for one company. He's enjoying experience. He's doing great work. But then his company gets purchased by a more bureaucratic firm. Anyone had that experience? I don't mean here. Just have you had that experience? Okay, so in the new company, he's determined to be a good citizen, a team player. That's code for say yes to everything without really thinking about it. And so he's the first person to be on the conference calls. If he's invited to a meeting, yes, of course I'll be there. Email chains, he's one of the first to communicate on them, and so on. And what he notices is that his stress and frustration is going up at exactly the same time as the quality of his work is going down. And it gets that gap is wide enough and painful enough that he starts thinking about leaving the company, And at the same time, the company comes and offers him an early retirement package. So this is like a no-brainer. Time to leave. But then he asks himself, well, what would I do if I left? He says, I'm too young to retire. I want to do something productive. I want to do the work I really already do, just not all this, all this rubbish. And so a mentor says to him, look, what you need to do is retire in role. That's not the same as stay, quit, and don't tell anybody. Right? We've worked with people in that category before, maybe. That's not the same thing. He said, look, you've got to use a different lens. Think about it almost as if you were a consultant. What would you do? And all of a sudden, he saw it with a different perspective, and he tried an essentialist experiment for the next few months. And he said, look, just because I was invited to a meeting didn't seem like a good enough reason to go anymore. So he maybe wouldn't go and see what the consequence was. Kind of reverse pilot. See what the effect is. Somebody came to him one time, look, we missed you at the meeting. He said, oh yeah. He said, so what did I miss? Well, we needed you to do this. Oh, great, I'll do that. I'll get that to you by Friday. And suddenly he realized 2 minutes versus an hour, and he'd solved himself, part of this energy. Well, repeat that experiment many, many, many times, exploring what happened, what didn't happen. Well, what happened? He got fired. He didn't get fired. It would change the tenor of the conversation if that had been the output. So this is what happened. First of all, what happened to him at home? Now, that's important. At home, he said, it's his words, he said, I got my life back. He says, at 6 o'clock, I put the phone off. I was able to go out and have dinner with my wife. I was able to go to the gym. My life back. Well, what happened at work? By the end of that year, his performance evaluations skyrocketed. He ended that year with one of the highest bonuses of his whole career. Now, how is this possible? It's simple, actually. It's arithmetic. You can either do many, many things averagely well, or you can do a few things superbly well, distinctively well. If you can choose the right few things and put all of your energy into those things, then you can go higher. Then you can go faster. So visually, what we're talking about is the disciplined pursuit of less but better. You can think about this as being the non-essentialist ideal. You're saying yes to it all, you're getting pulled, you're making a millimeter progress in a million directions. The alternative argument, the argument of essentialism really, is if you do few things superbly well, then you can do better, higher, make a higher contribution. It's a value proposition of essentialism. Well, Rochelle already put a few questions to you, but I want to put a couple more, and I want you to snap if they're true for you, okay? Just for fun. Somebody was already ready to snap, weren't you? Before I even said it, which I love. Okay, so have you ever, at work, let's say, have you ever been both overworked and underutilized at the same time? Yeah. Have you ever said yes just to please? Or to appease? Or to avoid trouble? Yeah, if you said yes to any of the above, snapped or otherwise, there is a way out, and the way out is the way of the essentialist. It's a totally different way of thinking about life. It's not adding one more little thing into your already overstuffed life. It's not one more thing. That would be a sort of an ironic way of treating the subject. It's a different lens, thoroughly different. It is a lens, a design lens, that was captured superbly well by Dieter Rams, who's the great designer at Braun, and he for 35 years. And he summarized all of his design principles into 10. Then he summarized all of those into 1, and then summarized that into 3 words. So we have just the distilled 3 words, and the words are less but better. It's not the same as less is more, less but better. But applying it not as into products as he did, not even into services only as he did, but to apply it as a design principle for life, for careers, for leadership, for the way that we operate. Because basically, we have been oversold the value of more and undersold the value of less. The question is, if we said yes to all the above, why? Why is it that we make this mistake? In fact, not only do we make the mistake, apparently, people make the mistake consistently enough that it's the stuff life regrets are made of. So the Australian nurse Bronnie Ware wrote a fascinating piece, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And in that, she identified, number one regret is living a life that was true to the expectations others had of us and not the expectations and sense of voice we had within ourselves. Number one regret of the dying. Number two was sort of work over key relationships and family. But just take that first one for a moment. How is it possible? Did anybody ever set out as their design criteria, I'm going to regret that at the end? This is my goal, my strategy? No, other intelligent, driven, successful, capable people, just as smart as you, just as capable as us, made this fundamental error. And I want to put the question to you, why? How is it that otherwise intelligent people get tricked by the trivial? This is the question. I actually want some answers to this. So just think about it for a moment more. Why is it that otherwise successful, intelligent people get tricked by the trivial? What are your thoughts on this? How does it happen? Don't be shy. What are your thoughts? How do we get tricked by the trivial? Go. Right, so shorter term thinking versus longer term decision making. You see this, of course, at the organizational level all the time because of quarterly pressures, and the only antidote is a very deliberate, disciplined approach to leadership. So that the right kind of leadership can push back on that, but anything less will get consumed by the ongoing, intense pressure to perform right now. Thank you for that. Go. Immediate feedback, is that what you said? What do you mean by immediate feedback? Right. So the response that you get with somebody can be immediate. So this is the problem of being rewarded in the moment for bad behavior, for saying yes without thinking. Oh, thank goodness, someone's going to do it. You know, you're the person, you're the go-to person, and they make a check mark. You're the person to go to every time I'm in a fix. We become the go-to person, which is good unless it gets in the way of our highest point of contribution. And then the other side of it is that we get punished for good behavior. And you can talk about focus all you like, right? But saying no in the moment can definitely have a social withdrawal. That's a great answer to that. Why do we get tricked by the trivial? What are other thoughts on this? Comment at the back. It's a habit. So what you're saying is that there's a meeting, you just go to it because it's on your schedule. That's what you do. So we get tricked by the routine that we're in. Yeah, I love that thought. Actually, I'll just riff on that for just a moment, and I want you all to still be thinking about this question of why do intelligent people get tricked by the trivial? It's a crucial question for us to ask. So while we talk about routine, just think about, I was in China not so long ago, and I went to the Cube. You remember from the Beijing Olympics? And I was there in the Cube, and I was thinking about all these Olympians and how they had performed and how superbly they had done. And I thought, in a way they made it look effortless. I know it wasn't, but they don't have the sense of execution we sometimes have in our lives and in organizations where it's forced all at the last minute and you try and, a Herculean effort and suddenly you manage to get it done. And there was no one falling in the pools. There was none of that sort of chaos that we think of. Somehow they were able to do this almost to appear effortless. And I was thinking about Phelps. I was thinking about those, extraordinary 8 gold medals. As I went back to research how he made that look so effortless, I found that routine was absolutely critical, but he designed it, or rather his coach, Bob Bowman, had designed it. So just think about not only the idea that routine was important, but the detail of his routine. So first of all, he arrived, as he always did for years before, 2 hours early to his race. 2 hours. And then the next 2 hours is in detail. He goes in, he does 400 backstroke, 800 freestyle, and so on, a whole set of swimming things. The same. He gets out, he sits on the massage table, never lies down, always sits. From 45 minutes to the time of the race, he never speaks to his coach. They both together have that agreement. And that is a norm that they've done for many, many years. He always sits down when it's time. He puts his towel on one side. He puts something else on the other side, his goggles on the other side, whatever, so that no one sits next to him. He listens to the same music. When he gets up to the stand, he always dries it first, and he gets on the left-hand side. He always takes off the earbud on the left first and then the right. Everything down to the nth degree, and not just his physical routine, but his mental routine as well. Starting many years before, Bob Bowman started a program with him called Put in the Videotape. And what the videotape meant was that every night and every morning, he was to imagine the perfect race in slow motion, precisely from beginning to end. From every stroke, including at the end, standing, screaming in success with the water dripping slowly off his face. Every night and every morning for a decade. So that when the moment came, this was autopilot, every single ounce of it. That, to me, is the power of designing the kind of routine that interrupts the routine we currently have. In fact, I think if a person could do a single thing differently to affect this whole idea of living an essentialist life, not a non-essentialist one, it would be to design a routine that really represented the things that were essential to them, so that they aren't having to get pulled into decision fatigue every flipping day, with all of these different decisions coming at us and being pulled so easily off course. Thank you for that comment. Why is it that otherwise intelligent people get tricked by the trivial? What are your thoughts on this? Go. We just don't know what's important. Yeah, we don't know what's essential. Yet the difference between somebody who has real clarity about that and doesn't have clarity is night and day. And I don't mean just comparing two different people, I mean the same person. So for example, think of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks in the early days was so unlikely of a person to say no that when she first was in the NAACP, they were looking for a secretary, and they asked her they said, you need to do it. And she said, I said yes because it had never occurred to me I could say no. That's amazing, isn't it? To think that that's the same person who in a different situation, says no in such a memorable way. What's the difference? I'll tell you precisely, because she answered the question. She said when she was sitting on the bus, and the bus driver comes to her and says, you have to get up. She said, in that moment, I felt clarity come around me like a warm blanket enveloping me. And I just knew clearly that I would never ride the bus again in that way. She did not know what the bus driver would do. It wasn't about manipulation. It was internal clarity. In fact, what she said to the bus driver when he said, well, listen, you have to move, otherwise I will call the police. She said, and these words ring in my ears, she said, you may do that. You may do that. You can do whatever you need to do, but I'm going to be doing this. This is clear. And of course, that no coalesced the whole civil rights movement and affected the whole world. Now, not every no is going to be like that, but this idea, this idea that internal clarity versus external pressure is a key place of battle is so important, that we create the space to figure out with high levels of clarity what it is we want to do. Excuse me, thank you. Yes, here. What tricks us from the trivial?
I think also there's been an increasing focus on teamwork in organizations, and the more we team up, the more codependencies we create. So I have lots of little arrows in my circle because there are lots of other circles, and they also have little arrows, and they all point to me.
Yeah, so I want to repeat for those listening, this idea that it has become exceedingly popular inside of organizations to say, look, teamwork is the answer to every problem. And so every time you create a team, whether it's a fully functional team or a committee for something, every time you do it, you massively increase the number of touch points and the complexity involved. And so I think that's a legitimate challenge, especially where you have each person full to brim with their own non-essential activities, or at least being pulled in a million directions. So what can you do about that? In a way, I think the argument for essentialism couldn't be made better than thinking about that dynamic, is that you actually cannot do as many things as we are saying to ourselves that we can do. You can't actually get a team aligned and focused on each person's 10 different things. It actually can't be done. And if you think about your own experience, how often that has been true, that you work on teams and you come together and you have these meetings and they're endless meetings and you look back and go, what was really achieved? And it's because of this idea that you can somehow fit it all in and do it all. One of the most sort of telling senses of this that I came across in researching the book was just the history of the word priority. Does anybody know this? So the word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. And it was priority, right? Singular. Okay, so just tell me with an obvious answer, what do you think it meant? What does it mean, priority? What do you think? What's first, right? Prior. The very prior thing, right? One thing. It stayed singular for the next 500 years. So it's only in the 1900s that we started pluralizing the term and starting to speak of priorities. But what does it mean? How can you have many, many absolutely prior first things? That's a logic problem, right? That's an evidence of a way of thinking that has become consuming in modern times. So often teams will have, coming back to your point of teams, no sense of irony at all. Here are our 10 priorities. And they don't even put them in priority order. I was working with an organization recently, and they knew I was coming to teach about essentialism, and they knew about priority, and they still announced their 9 priorities in no priority order. And so, we addressed it directly, and they spent the next hour together after the session voting on the order and which things they would really come to. And they chose, of the group 3, and they had them also in priority order after that. Well, that's a big difference, because the complexity, what happens when teams aren't really clear, is that everything gets worse really fast. And so all this politics that you start to experience inside of organizations and on teams is exacerbated and accelerated by the fact that we're only sort of clear about what we're really trying to do. Often when I talk to leaders about this, they'll say, look, I think we're pretty clear. And I think of myself wearing glasses. The difference between pretty clear and really clear is really big. And so pretty clear won't make it. Not if you want to have fast, mobile, agile teams. What you get if you don't prioritize, what you get if you don't get focus and high levels of clarity is you get counterfeit agility, where everything feels fast all the time because it's disrupted all the time, but actually you're not making momentum. It's motion sickness, not momentum. Thank you for that comment. How do we get tricked by the trivial? How do we get tricked by the trivial? What was your answer? Underestimating. Yeah. We think that something will take only a certain amount of time and it takes longer. Yeah, the term for this is the planning fallacy. This is a heuristic. It's very well known, very well established, scientific reality. And it just shows how sort of messed up we are really. Hopefully that isn't a negative way of saying that. But what it shows is that even where we have done a task before, like driven to work, it takes 15 minutes. But if you're on an email right before, you will believe it takes 10 minutes. And you will say to yourself, I will do this in 10 minutes. Maybe even in 5 minutes if the email seems important enough to you in the moment, urgent enough in the moment. And then, of course, you get in the car and and it does, of course, take 15 minutes at least, maybe longer because there's something unintended. When you take that idea of the planning fallacy, when you own it fully, it allows, again, permission to go, I'm just going to do fewer things because I know it will take longer than I'm currently estimating. And so that then at the end of the year, you don't end up having done 3 things and the most essential ones just didn't even get done. We've been talking about the bigger picture of one's whole life design, but of course you can write this in much smaller, more immediate cycles where you say, look, the next 3 months, what are we really going to get done? And unless we have figured out what the priority is and maybe 1 or 2 other things, we know what will happen. We'll end up at the end of this period with just a bit of progress in all of them. Or maybe having missed the hardest ones, the most important ones altogether. Thank you. More. How do we get tricked by the trivial? Otherwise intelligent people. Good. Peer pressure. How does it work? How does peer pressure trick us? Yeah. Oh, I see. So what you said is you look around and you see what everyone else is doing. Right. Okay, so it's the idea of just trying to, in a sense, compete or keep up with what everyone else is doing. Compare and compete. This is such an important idea in today's world because we're so familiar with the idea of information overload. Of course, right, that's our reality. But that isn't the reality of the last 10 years. The reality of the last 10 years is not information overload, but opinion overload. As we've gone from being connected to hyper-connected, what's really happened is that we've become more aware of what other people are doing than at any time in human history. So take the same set of assumptions, I've got to kind of keep up with the Joneses. That's eternal sense of human competition. But take that and apply it to today's world. Same level of weakness, same set of assumptions, but take it to this challenge that's so much greater. We know about what hundreds of people are doing, thousands of people are doing. And of course, we know about what they're doing at their very, very best, almost lying about their lives. That's the version that we see and learn about constantly. So this idea of opinion overload is a very real phenomenon. And once we name it, we can start addressing it differently. Okay, a couple other thoughts on this. Why are we tricked by the trivial? Go here.
Seems like, going back to your Rosa Parks example, there's something about socialized human nature that feels inherently uncomfortable saying no, which is what salespeople play off of, and in a world full of requests, combined with a lack of comfort saying no, almost like need permission to say no, there you get your agenda dictated to you on a constant basis.
Yeah, if you're being asked many, many times to do a thing, you must adjust in some like way. This reminds me of K. Krill. In fact, I think maybe I'll sort of finish on this story, and then we're going to do Q&A, so be thinking about if there are particular questions you'd like to share. But K. Krill is currently the CEO of the Ann Inc. brand, which is Ann Taylor and Loft brand, and years ago, she was just saying yes to all, right? Classic non-essentialist. Capable, it's the curse of capability. You can do all sorts of things. She's interested, she's social, she gets invited to all these different extra after work parties and all of these things. And she's just trying to do it all. And a mentor comes to her, and it's super language he uses. He says, you have got to learn to jettison the activities and the relationships that have little value for you, so that you can put it all in to the relationships and activities that are truly meaningful for you. And why I love that story is because she actually did it. She learned how to do it. And it's a capability just like any other capability. And so looking back now, she can say with clarity, I have become very good at this. And it's a learnable thing. It's not just something you either have or don't have. What I think is that we're like a novice with no. We just have run so few experiments with it. We just don't know what happens. So we always have the fear of the unknown with it. What happens if I just politely explain that I really can't take this on and do a good job? What happens if I try to negotiate the non-essentials with my boss? We don't do it. And as a result of that, we fear it more than we need to. I appreciate this very much. Maybe let me just comment on this, and then we'll have chance for question and answer. Here's what happens as a result of a conversation like this. People hopefully feel something, they sense something, maybe sense some opportunity, a possibility, maybe even feel a sense of being inspired. And here's what happens as a result of that. Nothing. Yeah, nothing. That's what happens. Unless that isn't what happens. There are times that we introduce these ideas, and I share that with people, and they totally get it. And they start small, but they actually bring about change in their own life, design a different pursuit, and are able to then create a very different kind of life for themselves and for the people around them and on their teams and in their organizations. And as a result of that, break through to the next level. And so I've seen enough of this to know that many, many times, it just gets pulled into the to the busyness bubble again. But I've seen it enough times where people take it on that I challenge you to be in the latter category. So thank you very much for having me so far today. Thank you. And I think we're going to do some questions.
Yes.
Go ahead,
so
Rochelle.
If anyone has any questions, you can come line up behind me at the mic. And we also are taking questions on the stream, so please type those in. I'll start with questions, I guess, since I'm here. I'm very inspired by everything that you just talked to us about today. And I'm just curious for you and how you practice being an essentialist. Do you practice what you preach? And what is the easiest thing for you to do? And what is the thing that you find the most challenging?
No, I don't practice it.
Yeah, I know, right? I figured.
This is all lip service here for me. First of all, I have to say I love essentialism. I love the principle of it. I love the discipline of it. I love the pursuit of it. And I love the experiments with it. Constantly trying to experiment with it. Now, does that mean you get it right? No, like all experiments. It's all prototyping. You're always trying and constantly figuring it out. I can point to times when I've got this so wrong. That was part of the reason that led me to write the book in the first place. Were times I'd made mistakes, and I can talk about that if people are interested. But what I've learned is trade-offs. The reality of trade-offs. And if I can find small things that I'm willing to trade off, things that, for example, I feel like I'm really like having a go at Facebook, but I'm not really trying to today. But I decided after a while, I thought, look, I'm going to just trade off. I don't spend much time on it anyway, but I'm going to take 10 minutes every week, take off Facebook time, and I'm going to call my grandfather every week. He's 94 years old, right? So he's in his encore. And I've done that pretty much for the last couple of years. But you will never trade that back. Not one of us would trade that back. We know, we can see it, but so often we don't see it in the moment. So I think the idea of small trade-offs, where we give up something, we go, look, it's okay, it's good, but it isn't essential and meaningful to me, and find one thing to trade it in, is something that we can fit in even when we're busy. So thank you.
Thanks.
And don't be shy. I'd love to hear the questions, and I learned from that as well. So please get in line.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. What's your name?
My name's Marianne, and I'm representing the people on the stream today. Have one question from Terry Bates on, the question is, if you are a subordinate, how exactly do you convince superiors and those in managerial tier that less will be better when their positions seem predicated on more projects and more capabilities?
Yeah, so Snap, if you kind of have that inherent question. Yeah, so embedded in that for a moment is the idea that who's the book written for, right? It's all very well if you're the CEO and you can just dictate this and so on, right? But what about for the rest of us? And it's for the rest of us that the book is written. It's for people who have begun to accept this idea that non-essentials are non-negotiable. The moment we accept that idea, we have lost a lot of power. The moment you accept it. And hierarchy will do that to you. Will help you to believe that you just have to. So the ability to gracefully, with political savvy, be able to navigate and negotiate these things is critical. I mean, the whole chapter is about this in the book, but a whole chapter on just gracefully saying no. But among the things that I think are useful is just bring the trade-off into the conversation. So it isn't my power versus your power. I mean, basically, we lose that battle in a hierarchy. So don't play that game. Play a different game. And the game is, let's talk about the trade-offs. Like, I'm happy to do, one way of bringing this in is say, I'm happy to do these 5 different projects, well. Or I can do 1 or 2 of them superbly well. Which do you want? And let's talk about that. So suddenly, it is an awkward conversation. I'm suggesting it's not. But suddenly, you bring that problem into a reasonable conversation about what are the trade-offs. Another way to say the same thing is, look, I'm very happy to do this new project you've just mentioned. Which thing should I deprioritize? I'm happy to do that too, but see, second way of bringing into the conversation the inherent nature of trade-offs. This is, I think, our important beginning negotiating bargaining chip, is that trade-offs are real, whoever you are. So bringing that into the conversation, I think, is one way to negotiate that I have seen to be successful. You don't start by saying no, right? You start by negotiating the reality of trade-offs. Thank you for that question. Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Doug. I'm probably the oldest guy in the room. I've been in industry for 43 years. I'm retired now. And I'm fascinated with this core logic of I can do anything but not everything. And you sort of just touched on this last answer. It's a big challenge for a professional to go to his boss and say, I can't do all of this, because he has expectations. And I just with that challenge in mind, what advice do you have in dealing, especially with bosses that won't take an answer? No, you do these things. That's what you were hired for.
Okay, so as you mentioned, I had responded already, and I don't want to repeat that response. So I will say something else that's maybe even a little more provocative. And I understand that this is a pretty sensitive way to respond, especially for, for a lot of people, actually. But part of it is, if you're working for someone who really is not open to negotiating in a sensible way, at least own that that's who you're working for and find someone different. No, I'm serious. I mean, it is like, your one wild and precious life. And to assume that this is it, that this is my option, I can either do everything they're saying and just take it, that is a very risky strategic position to be in. Now, obviously, some people really feel they're in that. I have been in situations myself where I felt like that. Would you mind if I shared actually 2 stories about this, when I got it wrong and where someone got it right? Would you mind?
Sure.
I wasn't really planning on sharing these, but I think they really speak to this. Okay, so first of all, where I got it wrong. Okay, so this is, I get an email from my manager at the time on I don't remember, Monday or Tuesday. It was when my wife, who's here, was expecting one of our daughters. And the email said, Friday would be a very bad time to have the baby because I need you to be at this client meeting. And I assumed that they were joking, and maybe they were, but for somehow I managed to be very conflicted about this. So all through the week, I'm like, oh, how am I going to do that? And then the baby is born on Friday morning. And I still, instead of being able to just enjoy this in the way that one would, hope to and to expect to be able to, I am trying to straddle the strategy, do them both, fit them both in, make it both work, right? You know the feeling. And so, with all the conviction I could muster, getting the power from, I said, yes. Yeah. And I went. I remember after the meeting, they said to me, the client will respect you for the choice you made. I don't really think the looks on their faces evinced that kind of confidence. But even if it had, and even if some extraordinary thing had come from it, which it didn't, surely I had made a fool's bargain. That is where, in a very personal way, I learned that lesson, right? If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. So I remember sharing that experience with somebody else prior to the book coming out. And they, as a result of it, went and negotiated, this is the second story, right? They went and negotiated it with their manager to have 5 days precious, focused time preparing for their wedding prior to the day. They came up with, this is the work that needs to be done, this is when it needs to be done by. They did the work superbly well, got it done before the deadline, the boss is thrilled with it, and then it gets into those 5 days, and the boss still calls. Sorry to do this to you, so-and-so dropped the ball, I need you to pick it up. It's really urgent. Now, for the 5 years previous, they would simply have said yes, because they had never said no, because they'd never even considered it. And so for the first time, empowered now with the logic of essentialism, they pushed back. This was our agreement. We came up with it. It's really essential. This is important. This is, I'm going to do it. Now, the boss didn't like it. So there was a momentary withdrawal in the relationship. But what happened was a week later at work, what happened is that the boss came finally and said, look, you know what? I've realized that the people on the team haven't been pulling their weight in equal ways. And so I was frustrated, but now we're going to have a real conversation about this and making sure that this is balanced. Yeah, but that couldn't have happened, wouldn't have happened, never had happened before because she'd never pushed back. What happened at her wedding was that she got to spend the 5 days preparing, and in her wedding, she actually put into her wedding vows that she would essentialize that marriage and her family over all other relationships. She put them into her wedding vows to essentialize them, is the language she used. Well, I think that's who the book's for. Now, it might not always be in the way that we're just presenting it, work versus family. Sometimes it will be, lots of times it will be. But it will be all sorts of projects and all sorts of things we're doing. And permission to negotiate that is absolutely critical. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hi, Greg. My name is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
And just want to I have a question, but I want to say it's kind of ironic that there's some people that I work with or that are too busy being busy to
be here.
To be here and benefit from your talk. I'll do my best to sell them on it.
You're saying that the people that really have the problem aren't here?
Perhaps, yes. Okay, so my question is about email, and maybe I'm wondering if you can suggest something organizationally. So I work here and I have an email address, and so anybody can send me email, and I'm automatically subscribed to a big pile of lists, and I'm sort of expected to passively know the content of those emails. Like, well, did you not see that? And what can I do? I can't really opt out. I can't just filter it all. I could filter some of it, I suppose, with rules. But it seems like an organizational question. Like, what can we do with this email system to help us focus our energy and attention?
I mean, email is such a good example of the non-essentialist era, right? It's absolutely true. I was just talking to someone about this, and they said, yeah, I turned off the computer and I put it back on. I had 500 emails. You can't actually read 500 emails, right? And we pretend to. And this is part of the madness of non-essentialism, right? Oh, did you read that? Oh, yeah. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. If that was longer than 2 sentences, you did not read it. Whatever you did, it wasn't reading. And so we write these emails and nobody reads, and people send them and we don't read them. I mean, this is like, as you say, a correct problem. I think on the worst days, I wonder if my tombstone's going to read, "He checked email." Oh, you didn't appreciate that, but it keeps me up at night. Okay, what can you do? And I think you have to start small. Culture is a very powerful thing, but if you literally just have you and the people on your immediate team, and maybe this sounds self-serving, so use a different book, that's fine, but if you simply read Essentialism as a team, what you introduce, and maybe the single most valuable contribution the book can make, is the introduction of words. Language is extraordinarily powerful. And when we have the language, what we have is logic. And with the language and the logic, you can have a conversation. And without language and logic, you can't. And so I think if you literally, just as a small team, you read it, you talk about it together, and then you have the exact same conversation. Look, what's our rules? Let's have rules. I think smartphones, same for social media actually, I think with both of these, the utility is so high, they're not going away. But they're like cars. Cars' utility is incredibly high. The cost is also high, but they're not going away because of their utility. So if we have rules, all sorts of rules to help protect us against those things. So it's perfectly reasonable conversation. And so I could advocate a variety of rules that you could introduce, but it's not the point. The point is to have the conversation starting small with a little group. You could certainly have times that you say, look, we're just off hours, we're not doing them. You could certainly have rules that say, we're going to have a day a week that is, we don't respond to email. You can send them, but we're not responding. Maybe all that sounds unrealistic, but then it's not unrealistic if you have a team of people that can start designing the rules. I would suggest that small team, reading the book, and then being able to negotiate together to do it. That's my thought for you. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, Greg. I'd like to thank you. My name is Kincaid.
Kincaid, good to meet you.
For making this a discussion and not just a presentation. It's very valuable.
Thank you.
I heard you mention your story about your daughter. I'm a fairly recent father myself. I have another one on the way in a month. And so what's essential to me is sometimes feels like it's being defined for me. And it's really my joy, of course, to take care of my children, my family. But sometimes it feels, there's that conflict between what feels good and enjoyable, like changing a diaper. It only gives you so much joy for so long before it feels like,
we appreciate this visual.
Yeah. So two questions is, one, how do you combat choosing what's essential when it doesn't feel good necessarily or feels tedious at times? And then two is realizing that, God willing, my children live a long life and a healthy life, and that I won't have to take care of them forever. How do you keep your ability to define what's essential limber as you go through life so that you can renegotiate those things more readily?
Those are lovely questions. let me just offer this first thought about limberness and being able to keep renegotiating what's essential. There's two different ways of thinking about the word focus, the idea of focus. And often we treat it as a noun. It's something you have, like a photograph. We mentioned Kodak earlier on, right? This was the idea. We are this thing. And I don't think that's the most useful way of thinking about focus at all. I think you have to think about focus as a verb. I mean, of course, it is a verb, but to think about it like that. So our eyes today see clearly, not because we took a photograph image and froze it when we first woke up, but because it's been adjusting and readjusting, a million times since. That's how we stay in focus. So I think the idea of having a constant process, a discipline, a weekly discipline at least, of asking ourselves now, what's essential right now? What is critical this week? I mean, a process that I think is a trade-off worth making is every week, once a week, I do this, take 20 minutes, sometimes a lot longer. So you trade off like one TV show, right? Or maybe there's people that don't watch any television, but most of us watch something. So you should trade off one television show or one thing that just is good, fun, but it isn't really essential. And with that time, you say, I'm going to go through a process. I'm going to ask what's been going on in my life this week, make a list. I'm going to go back to what the 2 or 3 goals are I want to achieve over the next 3 to 6 months. So you've got the where I am and where I want to be. And then the how do I get there, you do this. You say, what are the 6 essentials for this week? Put them in priority order. And then you cross off the bottom 5, right? You keep them because it's only sort of a symbolic idea, but you say, look, I'm going to do this one thing. You schedule that thing, whatever it is. In your case, right now, maybe a family thing would be the first thing, but you identify it, you schedule it, you put it in place, and then you work on the next ones going down. So I think just the discipline of pursuing that weekly practice is exceedingly valuable in making sure you stay in focus through the time. Maybe one other thought for you is just it's not something I came up with at all, but my wife and I have both done it, where you simply ask yourself, it's a thought experiment, you do it as often as you like, which is, if I only had 1 week left to live, what would I do? But then you don't stop there. You say, well, what if I had a month? What would I do? And you answer that question. What if I had a year? What would I do? And you answer that question. What if I had 5 years? And then finally, what if I have a whole, natural life left? What will I do? And the process connects us. In a way, it's the Bronnie Ware experiment, but we get to it now instead of waiting then. We sort of trick ourselves into getting to the moment of what's really essential and what's not. And in that process, I think we can learn to distinguish better between all the good pressured things and the things that are of primary purpose to us.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it gave you a good aerial view. Greg talked about a lot of amazing things that we're going to pick apart. So if there's anything that he talked about that you said, wow, I wish he would have said more about that, or I would have loved to hear more about that, well, guess what? We are going to get into that very thing in the next few weeks. If you do not have the book yet, I would highly encourage adding it to your library. Go out and support Greg in this. Go out and buy his book. You can go to any local bookstore. They will probably have it in stock. It's a very popular book. You can also go onto Amazon. You can go onto Barnes & Nobles. You can go to Kindle, Nook, iBooks. Even Audible has an audiobook on this. And if you want a shortcut to this, if you go to my website, firstthingsproductivity.com/52, as in episode 52, scroll all the way down to the very bottom of that page, you'll see a direct link to his book, as well as a link to another really good book that is somewhat similar to Greg's, called First Things First, which is a big inspiration for the title for this show, by Stephen Covey. The late Stephen Covey. Would highly encourage that you add that as well to your library. So next week we are going to be in chapter 2, so there's still time to get this book. You don't need this book to go through this study because we're kind of summarizing it. I'm giving my perspective on it, but again, I would encourage you to support this author, buy his book, add it to your library, give it as a gift to people. If you deal with coworkers or you're a manager, I would highly encourage you buy it for your staff and go through this. It, as it was mentioned in this video as well, a very good thing. And by the way, if you want to see the video, you can go to firstthingsproductivity.com/52, and I have a link to that video. You can watch it right on my website if you'd like to see Greg talk about this as well. So that's going to wrap up this episode today. As always, please consider leaving me a rating and a comment on iTunes. Just helps let others know about the show. I think it's been June since I've had any comments from anyone. Would love to hear from some of you guys. Would love if you left me some comments at my discussion site or on Facebook or Twitter. And eventually I'm going to have a way that you can email me. I'm still working on that. I just have a lot of things that kept coming up, and that's kind of got pushed to the back burner. So I'm still hoping to get that up soon to where if you want to communicate with me through email, you can do that as well. So until next time, remember this. Life is too short to not take it seriously and to let it go by with an afterthought. Put intention into your life today and take up this journey along with me to become an essentialist and embrace essentialism in every area of your life. Embrace today with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you.